Now, the first time I started home recording, it was around 2013, 2014, and I was still a little confused on the subject. And I remember I bought a microphone, and I think I had a USB converter because I thought you could just record the microphone straight into your computer. And that is not the case. So a simple formula for understanding how to record from home in a very basic setup. What you're going to need is microphones. You're going to connect the microphones to your audio interface, and the audio interface is going to connect to your computer. Now your computer will need software to run a DAW. DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. So inside your DAW, it will allow you to record the sounds coming through your microphones and edit them. All right, let's talk about the overhead microphones. So on my setup, I'm using Audio-Technica AT2035 cardioid condenser microphones. So those are these two up here on top. And what those are meant to do is they're supposed to mainly pick up the cymbals and the overall drum set sound. There's many different ways you can set them up, but here I just have them set up on the left side and on the right side of the drum kit. So this microphone is sort of focusing more on this area and is picking up heavily any of the cymbals that are on my right side. And then my left side microphone picks up the hi-hat, the crash, and any other cymbals that I add to this side. And in general, both microphones are just going to pick up the whole kit sound. So one interesting recording technique you can do is that if you raise your cymbals higher, then that allows those microphones to focus more on the cymbals, and you can kind of mix them more when you get into your mix. One thing I want to do when I'm setting these up is I want to measure them and make sure they're the same distance away from the snare drum. This will help minimize phasing when you start editing your mix. So I did measure out the distance of the microphones to my snare drum a while ago. And if you don't have measuring tape on you, what you can also do is just use a microphone cable. So with your microphone cable, what you can do is you can place it in the center of the snare drum and measure it out to your first mic. And then keeping that same distance, aim it towards your second mic and see if they're the same. Let's talk about the placement of the microphone on the snare drum. So here I have a Shure SM57, and I'm using a clip-on that clips right onto the drum here, clips right onto the top rim. For these clip-on stands, you can pick up those online. I think I found mine on eBay, and it was relatively cheap. Maybe it was like $10 or something. So you can find those just online. You can also just use a regular boom stand, or you can use, they sell specialty snare drum mic stands that are a lot shorter. And those are a lot better, I think, in terms of if you're switching drums in and out all day, then having the mic on a stand works a little bit faster, so you don't have to readjust the mic every time. But for now, the clip-on works just fine for this room I'm in, which is pretty small, so I'm trying to eliminate as much stands as I can. So for the angle of the microphone, I'm actually pointing it right above center. It's not directly in the center of the snare drum, but it's just right above center. And I have about 2 fingers distance from the top of the head to the microphone. Now the reason why I aim it right above center and not towards center is because if I just tilt it a little bit more and it's aimed directly at center, I usually find that I get too much of the other drums into my snare drum mix, or even some of the cymbals and a lot of the room sound. So I like to focus the snare drum sound more by making sure the placement of the microphone is right on the snare drum. The other thing too is this is a very traditional setup where the microphone is right next to the hi-hat and it's pointing away from the hi-hat. The reason for that also is because the hi-hat gets picked up very well by microphones, so having the snare drum microphone aimed away at the hi-hat will help reduce the hi-hat noise. So here's an up-close look at the snare drum microphone. You'll see it's right next to the hi-hat here. and that's the angle that I have it placed at, and it's on that mounted stand that's connected to the rim. Generally, when I mic my bass drum, I like to place the microphone inside this porthole here. And in general, I kind of want to angle the mic and point it in the direction of the bass drum beater. So you can see that part of the mic is inside of the bass drum. Another way you can set up your microphone is actually to point the mic outside right at the resonant head. You can get different sounds by depending on how close you put it to the resonant head. This is a good option usually if I'm doing a jazz setup and there's no porthole. I usually try to aim the microphone actually just about like maybe two inches away from the drum head, and I like the sound of that for jazz tuning. You can also try experimenting. Instead of aiming the mic directly at the center, you try aiming it off center. With microphone technique, there's not really one way to do it. There's several different ways, and depending on the kind of sound you want to get and what you're recording, you might try different options and see what you get. Okay, let's talk about microphone placement on the toms. So here I have a Shure PG56, and it's hooked onto the drum by this mount here. It goes right on the top rim, and it allows for the microphone to be in very close contact with the tom. The angle of the mic is pointing between the center of the drum and the edge of the drum. So it's not pointing directly in the middle, because sometimes I find if I do that, I'll start picking up other sounds like the snare or other drum noises into this microphone. So the point of the tom mics is to really focus in and pick up the initial tom sound. It's pointing really close to it. It's about 1 finger length away from the drum head, so it's in very close contact to it. Let's hear what our 10-inch tom sounds like with the microphone on it now. One thing I also like to do on my toms is I'll place a little bit of tape on there just to muffle the sound a little bit. Okay, now let's set up our other microphone on our 12-inch rack tom. And we're going to set it up just like the first 10-inch rack tom. And this microphone is going to be angled away from the first microphone. So the distance on this is relatively the same. And as you can see, they're set up to where they're angled away from each other. And this is to prevent the microphones from picking up each other as they're recording. Let's check out what this 12-inch rack tom sounds like with the microphone on it now. Alright, and lastly, we're going to now place our floor tom microphone onto our floor tom. So just like all of the other microphones, it has a clip on there, and you're just going to clip it onto the rim. So for the floor tom microphone, I have it angled generally the same as the other tom mics. One thing to keep in mind is if you have cymbals like ride cymbals or crashes on the side, try to aim the microphone away from those cymbals so you don't pick them up into your microphone. Alright, so that's all of the microphones in my setup. So now let's talk about where the microphones are going and how to record them into your own home computer. So every microphone has microphone wire, and these wires, like the one I'm talking into right now, they're connected to my audio interface. So let's check out my audio interface so you can see what's going on. Alright, so here is my drum set with some of the microphones. And the wires travel down here. See, they're running this long stream. They loop around back here. And they all connect into my audio interface, which is here. So this is a Scarlett 18i20. Here are my overhead microphones. They all plug into this audio interface, and they go into this USB, which plugs directly into my computer. And back here, you can see all of the microphone cables that I have running back there. I'm running Logic Pro, and there's my voice recording on the computer screen. Okay, now that I have these microphones set, let's play and see what it sounds like. So when I'm teaching Skype or online lessons, I find that since I'm mixing the audio through my DAW, it doesn't quite translate into the Skype program. So what I do for Skype is I actually have a separate mixing board that has a USB plugin, and so that way I can mix through the hardware, and that mix sound comes in through the Skype program. So this here is my mixing board. It's a Yamaha MG10XU, and I use it when I'm teaching Skype lessons. So I just have a basic plugin here for my bass drum, snare, overhead, and then a talkback microphone. And then what I also do is I take the mix from my audio interface and I plug it in for the tom mix. So I find just mixing through this board helps create a better sound when I'm teaching online through Skype or through Zoom. All right, everyone, I hope that tutorial was helpful in helping you out with your own simple home recording setup. And this equipment I've been running since 2014. I started off with some very basic microphones, and they've worked out really well. What I recommend if you're on a tight budget, if you're recording drums, just start with one microphone. Start with the overhead, and then add one kick drum microphone, and see if you can learn how to do it just by using that. And then once you add other equipment, then you already have some working basic knowledge to move into the next step. So I hope this helped you guys, and if y'all have any questions about home recording, please feel free to reach out and contact me.